So, why is AI such a big deal? This is part one of a 14-part series, The Introduction to AI. Okay, what are the most important innovations in modern history? Now, of course, there's going to be a wide variety of opinions on this, but personally, I would think the Wright brothers' first flight is on that list. I would also put on there Edison's light bulb, and I would also say the iPhone. My goodness, you've got to watch Steve Jobs give that original presentation. Even though they go over the top with their hype, they completely undersold its impact on the world. I would also say things like an app that's personally meaningful to you, like the Gospel Library app, is on that list. It transformed the way that I understand the Lord's work. Now, recently, Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft and one of the main movers and shapers of the internet, was asked this question. And he said, I knew I had just seen, when he saw the demonstration of the early versions of ChatGPT, the most important advance in technology since the graphic user interface. ChatGPT, one of the most important innovations. Really? Well, let's get some perspective on that. I want you to think about the way that information has flown through humanity through the years. Initially, it was passed orally, and it was done so for thousands of years. And this was done primarily by people gathering around the sages, the leaders, the oracles, the philosophers, and hearing them. And if you were not there at that moment in time, then you really missed your opportunity. Sometimes oral traditions are passed down by word of mouth from generation to generation, and things get lost or forgotten. It was an imperfect way at best. Writing made ideas durable. Unfortunately, though, a very small percentage of the population had the ability to read and write or had access to things that were written. But at least an idea could be written down and remembered verbatim for tens, hundreds, even thousands of years. The printing press made books affordable. It was no longer astronomically expensive to write something down or create a book. There was something only rulers and states could do, but now it was accessible to the average person. It made the information flow an order of magnitude, perhaps two, more accessible than it was before that. Now, libraries collected information. This picture right here is from the National Library in Prague, and this was definitely under lock and key. Rulers, heads of state, even religious figures saw information as dangerous and as a form of power, so they would collect it and hoard it. And in many times, in like English manners in the Renaissance, people would demonstrate their power with the size of their library and the number of books they had, because average people like you and I had zero access to these. But then public libraries made the books available to the masses. And the first public library was in Vermont. And then Philadelphia had the public library system. And today, most people in the world have access to libraries to some kind. And this definitely made it possible for people to get more access to information. But of course, that information was often dated. In 1991, Congress passed the High Performance Computing Act. And this birthed the internet as we know it. And if you look at this bill, it doesn't really say it's going to transform society, but you and I both know it did. This, coupled with the web browser invented by CERN, this in Switzerland, coupled with Google in 2001. Can you believe it was that late? And finally, coupled with a smartphone, has made information accessible to the vast majority of the population, the likes of which the world has never seen. And perhaps this has fueled the rate of innovation we have experienced in the past 50, 100 years, is the more information is accessible, the more innovation tends to happen. Now, there are certain parallels between this information boon and the boon of intellectual capability. Initially, the only people who can think were humans. And so any kind of computation, any kind of calculation was done by humans alone. 4,000 years ago, the Samaritans invented the abacus, and this definitely automated and simplified calculations. Babbage created the analytical engine, which was the first mechanical computer, which is able to compute things automatically. It was not programmable and it could only do very specific things and it was horrendously expensive, but now we had machines that could automatically compute. ENIAC was the first general purpose electronic computer. It was programmable, which was a really unique thing because before that, every computer was designed to perform a specific operation, and now this could do pretty much any calculation. Let's fast forward to the mid 1990s, and Deep Blue, a program invented by IBM, defeated the best chess player in the world, Kasparov. And this is the first time that a computer was able to beat humans at a highly complex strategic game. Kasparov was crushed by this. Another 10 years later, and Watson, invented once again by IBM, defeated Ken Jennings at the game of Jeopardy! This was a very unconstrained problem space, extremely intuitive. Interestingly, is Watson did not have access to the internet to do this with only information that it had on hand. And it stunned the world to think that a computer could beat humans at their own game. And then in 2002, ChatGPT was released to the world by OpenAI. So notice that large language models and AI is just a progression of the types of thinking machines we've been inventing for the past 4,000 years. But the most important thing is this. The internet democratized information, and now AI democratizes intellectual capabilities. There are very important parallels between the two. And just as we see every aspect of our everyday lives changed by the internet, we can also expect every aspect of our daily lives to be impacted by AI in the coming years. Although I don't think it's going to take 20 or 30 years to do it like it did for the internet. It's probably going to happen in 5 years. So the urgency to get on top of this is real. This means we all have the need to become more sophisticated AI users. And to describe these levels of sophistication is the Artificial Intelligence Maturity Model, otherwise known as AIM. The bottom level is a novice, and this is where we all begin. These are they who don't really understand how the technology works and do not know how to get the most out of it. We are all here now, or we all have been here not very long ago. Level 2 is a prompt engineer, and these are they who understand how the technology works at a certain level, what it can do and what it cannot do. And these people also provide the necessary context, the background information, as well as the specificity for a prompt in order to reliably get the responses they need. Level 3 is an agent manager. An agent manager, these are they who take a large problem that is too big to handle with one prompt, and they break it up into small prompts and manage the solution process. In many ways, it acts just like a human manager would, working with a bunch of individual contributors. They orchestrate the problem-solving process. They delegate subtasks to agents. They evaluate the quality of the agent's work. They redirect and reprompt as necessary when the initial raw results are not sufficient. And they integrate all these different pieces into a single cohesive whole. And with these agent management skills, you're able to solve problems far harder and far more complex than you are with a single prompt that a prompt engineer would do by themselves. The final level is an agent engineer. And these are they who train large language models to perform tasks they were previously unable to do. This series will go through all 4 of these steps so we can learn how we can go from a novice to a prompt engineer to an agent manager and finally to an agent engineer. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here. This beautiful picture here is called the Nepalese Mandela. It's a view of a Buddhist temple looking straight down on it. This Buddhist temple is called a stupa, and these are beautiful, beautiful works of art. In order to produce something like this, you have to go through a 5 to 10 year training process, an apprenticeship. The first year, you kind of observe the masters at work, and you work with basic geometric shapes. And over the next couple of years, you go out and you make your own brushes and you make your own paper. You do this by going into nature, cutting down a tree, taking the branch, form the branch into the handle of the brush, procuring the hair from yaks to make the brush bristles, and putting it all together. And you do the same thing for the paper, and you even do the same thing for the pigments and the inks. And when you're finished, the mandala you create is completely and wholly created by you. It has no machines involved and no humans involved besides your own labor. The level of authenticity is very, very, very high. Let's contrast this a little bit with a photographer. This particular photographer is known for doing zero post-processing work. In other words, every time this photographer clicks the shutter, then that exact picture is what is delivered. There is no Photoshop, there is no cropping, there's no color adjustment done at all. This particular photographer does a lot of studio work, so the lighting is artificial, the backdrop is artificial, the posing is artificial. So you can make an argument that this is not quite as authentic as what the Nepalese Mandela artists are doing, but the level of authenticity is very high. Let's contrast that with this picture that was taken from a photographer in the Himalaya. Now you can see the blade of the helicopter on the top. You can see how the sun kind of splattered kind of funny on the canopy, and you can see the reflection on the right-hand side. Now, after about 25 minutes of Photoshop work, we get the picture on the bottom here. It is exactly the same picture taken from the same frame, but it's a more accurate representation of what the photographer felt while in the helicopter because he didn't see the blade, he didn't see the reflection, the eyes kind of pull that out. And this is kind of how it felt. You can make a strong argument that you spent a little bit too much time on the Photoshop or the color adjustment or the cropping or whatever. But my question is this still authentic? And this is something we all need to come to grips with when we use AI. Are we going to be down to the basics? In other words, when I write, I'm actually going to create my own paper and create my own pen. I'm going to write my essay and no one's going to help me? Or am I allowed to use a typewriter? Am I allowed to use a word processor? Am I allowed to use autocorrect? Am I allowed to use a grammar checker? Am I allowed to use AI to proof my work? Am I allowed to use AI to redraft my work? Each of us needs to come up with our own personal manifesto describing what we feel in our personal, professional, academic context is appropriate use of AI.